to know what was wrong. I had to find out what it was. And
the first thing I wanted to have is no toxic cleaning products.
Just because you have brain change doesn't mean you can't still do things. You may do it differently. You might need more time.
I decided to turn my disability into my ability, and around 7th and 8th grade, I started playing able-bodied sports.
If we were knowledgeable, if we were educated, we would have solved science earlier. Now
you battle for every single inch of help.
Like, for example, if James's head is bothering him, he has peppermint essential oil with a roller top on it. And he knows to roll his head, but he has to be prompted and reminded.
A New Perspective, hosted by Tim Sutton. Brought to you by A Better Understanding, bringing you a better understanding and a new perspective on disabilities.
Hey everybody, this is Tim Sutton bringing you a new perspective. Episode 16 of season 3 is here, and bringing you something a little bit different. And that's going to be educational for me as well. So I hope you learned something about it. It's really revealed some things as I've researched this topic. I worked as a law enforcement officer for 33 years, 23 of those working with people with disabilities, mainly autism, other intellectual disabilities, Alzheimer's, and dementia. And one thing I noticed with working and interacting with a lot of people with autism is the family would tell me a lot of times that the individual had ADHD, also diagnosed with ADHD. And I never really knew a lot about it, knew more about the autism aspect. But this past week has given me an opportunity to delve into the ADHD and to try to educate myself. As I tell you many times on this show, and when I teach, is you don't know what you don't know. So you can't know it all, but you should go out there and try to learn as much as you can about different things and different individuals. But the ADHD has really opened my eyes to a better understanding of ADHD and what it's all about. And I was made aware of a gentleman through Anthony Griffo, my producer, who also has a podcast. The gentleman's name is William Kerb, and he has a podcast called Hacking Your ADHD. He has ADHD, and I've listened to some of his podcasts and some other interviews just to try to better inform myself of ADHD as opposed to autism. But what I'd like to do is just invite William on the show, Will on the show, and let's talk a little bit about ADHD and what it all entails and learn a little bit.
Hey there.
Hey, well,
thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic because, yeah, there's a lot there. And one of the things that was just popping into my head is that you've probably worked with a lot of people with ADHD, considering how prevalent it is in like law enforcement itself, like a lot of officers have.
Right. Oh, yeah, a lot of officers have it. And to be honest with you, just listening to some of the ways the brain works, as I was learning more and more, I was thinking about high school and going to college and procrastinating and just waiting and not being able to plan this and plan that. And then you get stuck at the last minute trying to get things done, having a hard time staying focused. And you bring up law enforcement. I thought about that because it's something different every day. It's not a routine thing. So you can get involved in something, stay focused in that a little bit, and then clear up, go on to another thing, get focused on that. So it really opened my eyes and got me doing some self-reflection on me and how I went through my life, and I go through my life daily now. And it's very educational. So I really appreciate you being here with us. Tell us a little about your podcast, the Hacking Your ADHD. What is your sole purpose behind that?
So I got diagnosed, I'm going to say like 2008. And it was something where I got diagnosed. I went on to medication, and then that was about it. That was all I did for 10 years about. And
right.
It was this thing where it's like, okay, that it helped, but there's this saying within the like ADHD creators I hear a lot is that pills don't teach skills. And it's just because even though the medication definitely helped and was something I like recommend to people, just doing that does not solve your ADHD issues.
All right.
And so as I was learning more about how to do those kinds of skills, I was like, oh, I'm interested in doing podcasts because I had previously done another podcast, and I was like, okay, I want to transfer my podcast skills into something that's going to help my brain work more often and share this information that I'm learning about that at the time there was very few ADHD podcasts out there. And so I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to put my hand in the ring, try this out and do these. At the time I did a lot of very short form monologue episodes where I would just talk about issues, delve more into interviews now, but it is still a focus of like, hey,
Right.
what are these small skills that we can learn and that we can apply to our lives that make it just a little bit easier?
Right. Yeah, that's what I try to do here. I bring guests on just to talk about the disability, what's going on. And also occasionally I'll do just solo, just give some education on the stuff that I am familiar with, just to educate people. And that's why, I feel so blessed to have people like you come on. So how old were you when you were diagnosed?
Mid-20s, like I think it was like 20, 23, 24. And yeah, so it was like after college and high school. And so like, yeah, like you look back and you're like, oh my God, I had known this would be like, that explains a whole lot.
Yeah. That's what like I said, I was looking back, educate myself, but looking back at high school and college, and I'm like, it would not surprise me because I sometimes have a hard time staying focused. I know what I want to get done, and I'm like a burst of energy right at the beginning, but easily get distracted and move on to something else, and just completely forget. And what's been tough for me is the past 2 months I've been recovering from hip surgery. So I'm sitting here thinking about all of these things that I want to do, need to do, and it's just constantly running through my brain. But when I get to the point where I'm able to do them, I'm off doing something else, and not what I want. Well, tell me some of the struggles you felt like you dealt with in high school and college.
Definitely staying on task was a huge issue. It's follow through with my intentions, which is this like aspect of executive dysfunction where you're like, oh, I want to do this thing. Like I literally want to do this thing, but I can't find a way to get myself to do it. Like I'll stare at a wall first, and it's like I would be like, okay, I need to like study for this exam. I'm going to go to the library and I'll sit there for 4 hours and I'll make sure I get it done. And I don't do anything for those 4 hours.
Right.
And it's
I know that feeling. I know that feeling. I used to have to hide myself in the library somewhere and try to limit the distractions. However, there was always a distraction there.
Or all the disorganization, the losing keys, the not turning in assignments on time, be like, oh, I have not just like procrastinate, but not procrastinating because I didn't know that I was like, oh, I have to do this week.
Right. It catches up with you. Absolutely catches up with you. How did you feel once you were diagnosed? I mean, what all did you have to go through to be able to get that diagnosis?
Yeah. Well, so I have 3 siblings that all have been diagnosed before me. So that was the impetus for me to be like, oh, I know there's a genetic component to this. I will go get this checked out. And so I did can't remember the name of the test, but I filled out a bunch of forms. I went and saw a mental health specialist at my provider. They talked to me. They talked to my now wife, then girlfriend, about like what I was like at home so that they could get a sense of not just what I was reporting, but other people were noticing these behaviors as well. And it took, it was a couple-week process to get through everything, but it is considered kind of like a gold standard version of getting the diagnosis.
Right. What kind of relief was it? Was it, oh no, I've got ADHD, or is it, I finally know what's going on?
It is, it's because it's like, yeah, I finally know what's going on. I understand, like, that explains so much. Okay, now there are things I can do, which is why, like, I always kind of get, like, a little bit, people are like, oh, I don't want to be, like, labeled with something. I'm like, you're going to get labeled regardless. This label gives you something where it says, there's something you can do about this now.
Right.
So.
And I could see, and part of and you probably label yourself.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes I'll in retrospect, I look back, go, you're just lazy. You're just lazy. You can't do it. You can't get it done. You can't get it done. And it's, it's frustrating, but I guess to have that diagnosis, it's somewhat of a relief to realize, it's not that I'm lazy. It's this other thing going on in my brain.
Yeah. I mean, that was the inflection point of when I really started taking my ADHD seriously. I was just texting with a friend being like, man, I just didn't do this thing because I'm lazy. And then I was like, well, it's not because I'm lazy. It's probably because of my ADHD. And that just like clicked in my brain. I'm like, I can do something about that.
Right.
There's probably like a lot. And then like I started looking into the resources and I was like, oh yeah, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I need to do things differently.
Right. And you talk about the neurodivergence, and I think we've got a slide to show. Like I said, I was always thinking autism, because that's what I was trained. But as I went out and about and met people and had some people say, I've got autism, or they've got autism as well as ADHD. And, we did a show on dyslexia, and there's so many, it's so diverse. There's so many things out there. That I would hope people who feel kind of like I did, or maybe you did, would look into some of these things and realize, I'm not to blame. It's what's going on. This is what it is. Now let's deal with it and make the best out of life as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's a lot of what I like dive into my show with. It's like things I've learned where I was just being like, man, why can't I do this thing? And then finally having that light bulb, oh, that's my ADHD that's causing this. Okay, how do I work with my ADHD to make this something that I can do, like where I'm not having this message over and over again.
Right. And something, I think one of the podcasts I was listening, I can't remember if it was yours or not, but talking about giving tasks to things that you're not really interested in, but you have to do it. And I know in my job as a law enforcement officer, I'd be given assignments and it's like, this is not really my thing. This is traffic, counting cars, doing this stuff. And I never was big into traffic itself. I like the criminal aspect. So it was such a burden for me to sit down in a room looking at, reports, statistics and things like that. And it was just exhausting to have to do that because I had no interest in it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is so hard to motivate yourself with ADHD when you don't have that interest aspect. And so there's a lot of like, okay, how can I make this interesting, in this instance, can I add a reward at the end? Can I listen to music? Can I have some accountability on the side with this? Because there's always ways to be like, okay, it's not that I can't do it. I just need to find a different way to do it.
But you also feel like, I know I did, you would push through it to get it done, but you didn't feel like it was the quality probably that it should be. I would have something to turn in, but I think it was indicative of my interest in the topic. But I would do the best I could, knowing that if this was their thing and that's what they were interested in, why not let them handle it, them deal with it? But, when you're in the work world, in the school world, you had classes you weren't into, but you were still, you had to do it.
Yeah. I mean, and if you didn't have that deadline, like I have to turn this in, it would just never get done.
Oh, I know that feeling. I know. I've still got assignments due for classes from when I was in college in 1987. So I keep telling myself one day I'll get it done, but luckily was able to graduate. So we're good. So what do you, a support system? I mean, how is your family, your wife, and all? I obviously didn't know all about it. And again, we talked right before the show about how ADHD, autism, some of your issues are actually invisible disabilities that you can't tell by interacting with someone, or tell by talking to somebody, spending time with them, especially if you don't know anything about it. But you can't look at you at face value and say, oh, he's got ADHD. What's your support system like with your family?
Oh, it's a lot of like communication about what's going on. I do have my wife also has ADHD, so we are both like aware of like where these where it can double up and cause major problems. Being very clear with what's on our calendar, being very but there's breakdowns of like, oh man, we haven't done dishes in a while. It's very evident. Like,
Yeah. Talk about that calendar. It's a struggle for me to just, okay, I have this to do. Let me go put it on the calendar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we need, and it's like calendars are number one tool I have to use. Like I could not survive without having that because I would just never know when stuff is.
Right.
And being very, very on making sure it always gets in there. And then also the other side, just like also I have to check my calendar every day that meets because I can't just putting it on there, it won't do anything.
Right.
But yeah, for support systems at home, it is a lot about communicating and being understanding like, hey, this wasn't, like if something gets forgot or misplaced or something, it's the giving the grace of like, hey, this wasn't their intention.
Right. We're missing that doctor's appointment and realizing you still got to pay a copay.
Yeah.
It's, that's another reason to be checking that calendar every day. But yeah, it's to me going and writing something down on the calendar, going to the refrigerator, putting it on the calendar. So not just I remember, but if anybody were to look at it, they'd know, okay, well, let's not plan this because he's got a doctor's appointment. So to me, as silly as it sounds, it's labor intensive. Mm-hmm. But it's something that needs to be done to make sure that you're, on your game and you're showing up when you're supposed to be showing up and you're doing exactly what you need to be doing by the time you need to have it done.
Yeah, and it's also being like, doing like, hey, I like doing something on the calendar, like, oh, remind my wife that, hey, are you heading out for that soon? Being, and being as non-judgmental about these things as we can be.
Yeah, and it's not a nagging type thing. I mean, both know what's going on in each other's brain. And I can see where people, if you constantly, hey, you remember you've got this, are you on your way? It's not a nagging thing. They understand what's going on and they're not trying to criticize. They're trying to help you do the best you can and be the person that, you want to be. But do you find that it's just having to focus and remember all this stuff and really address these situations that I would think it's exhausting?
Yes. There is a lot goes into it. And so it is something where, you don't always get to do everything you want to do because you have to balance it with how much energy you have throughout the day. And being like, okay, this is the only things we're going to do today because we know that we try to do more, things are going to fall apart. And
right. I guess it's a matter of it's a 24/7 of trying to train your brain.
Yeah.
So, and you think about how tiring that is. Something just popped in my head as far as I know autism, a lot of times, there are a lot of sleep issues because the brain is constantly going. Do you find with ADHD that's your brain trying to get your brain to settle down? And how is your quality of sleep?
I have worked on sleep a lot. So my sleep is decent now, but it is with a lot of caveats on making sure that it gets to that quality because it is incredibly hard to get to bed on time because going to bed is boring. I don't want to do it. And once I'm in bed, I have to get my brain to slow down and stop thinking. And I have to, I also have to, I'll wake up and be like, oh, I want to go do things. And it'd be like 3 a.m. And that's not great for getting a lot of sleep.
Right. I find myself doing the exact same. Middle of the night, you wake up and you just got everything running through your head.
Yeah.
Nothing that you can get up and do right then, but in your brain, I need to get it done.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of people with ADHD also have this thing called, I believe it's delayed sleep phase, where we have the like normal times that we would go to bed based on our circadian rhythm. With ADHD, a lot of people's circadian rhythm is delayed to a point where it is much later in the evening or maybe the next morning where they will have the want to be going to sleep.
Right. So. Yeah, I know I'm a night owl, and it's always been to just stay up late. It's this feeling that I'm going to miss something.
Mm-hmm.
And then I don't want to go to bed and lay there and just wait and wait and wait. So I try to make sure that when I go to bed, I'm about to just pass out because I know I've got to get to sleep. Therefore, when I get into bed, my brain's not active. But I can only imagine, and I did 6 years of midnight shifts working when I first started, became a police officer.
Mhm.
And I can only imagine somebody who's really dealing with ADHD, severely, I guess you could say, and circadian rhythms, how that, what a bundle of confusion that must be working that midnight shift and dealing with ADHD.
Yeah, and because also there's all the stuff that's going on during the day, and so you have this like fear of missing out. Of you're like, oh, I'm gonna miss doing these things with my friends, so I'm just gonna not sleep. I was talking with a ADHD doctor a few weeks ago, and he's like, yeah, in his college days, he's like, I just got like 4 to 6 hours a night sleep for the entire time. He's like, it was not good, and it has probably permanently affected my health. And that is how I dealt with that idea of that. I want to do everything, and if I can't, I'm going to miss.
Yeah, I could see that because I worked with guys. I would go home, go to sleep when I got off at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I could sleep. I knew I was missing out, but I had other guys I worked with who would go home and get 3 hours of sleep, get up and just be all over town during the day, come back, maybe lay down for 30, 45 minutes. And then next thing you know, they're back to work a midnight shift. And I never understood how in the world their bodies survived. And I knew even though I was getting sleep working midnights, I was probably damaging my body, but I could only imagine what they were doing to theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause, I always talk about this with when we are like going on that extra energy, we are borrowing it from someplace else with interest.
Right.
So there's this idea with ADHD that we have like hyper focus where we can really get intensely focused on something. And it is a great way to get a lot done, but
Right.
you are borrowing that energy from the next day, from the next week, where you will have this huge crash.
Right. Oh, I'd run into a wall if I did not get my sleep, and my body would start shutting down. I'd be sitting there just sweating, just ready to just shut down and go to sleep wherever I was. So yeah, it's very interesting because I don't think this is something a lot of people are educated on. And like I said, I knew nothing about ADHD, but the more I'm hearing about it and learning about it, I'm questioning quite a bit. So what kind of work do you do now? And does ADHD affect your kind of work, what you do?
Well, I do my podcast full time now. And it is, like it can be really hard to get stuff done. I will be, just stuck not getting things done. There's an idea that we occasionally hear out there called ADHD paralysis, which I will give the caveat that is not within the diagnostic criteria at all, but is something that you find with executive dysfunction where, like, you'll be stuck on the couch and you're like, I want to go do things and I cannot get myself to do it. And I'm like, I know, yesterday, on Monday night, or whichever night it was, mix up my days of the week. Early week, I had a D&D night, got to bed really late, woke up, and I was like, okay, I need to do these things to get sure I have a show ready for the end of the week. And none of it happened. Like, the bad sleep compounded all these ADHD traits I have and this inability to get things done, and I'm just stuck.
Right. That's got to be frustrating. And just, but at least there's a reasoning behind it. And it's not just, like I said, where somebody could sit back and go, oh, they're just lazy, I don't want to do it. Or you start to feel like I'm just lazy.
Yeah.
What's wrong with me? I need to get it done. But yeah, it's frustrating. I understand where you're coming from. And like I said, I've never been diagnosed, but got me thinking. But I think the important thing here is let people hear what's going on. Some of them may find it in their lives, but to realize that person, they're not necessarily lazy. There may be something else going on. And so you can't judge somebody by that. And again, being an invisible disability, somebody looks at you, go, oh, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just lazy. And that's got to be, the judgmental aspect's got to be difficult.
Yeah. Well, and it's something I think back on is if someone is struggling and you can't tell why, there is a reason. There is a reason that they are struggling, and it is important to try and not just be like, and especially for yourself, if you are having trouble doing something, you're like, I can't do this, and then you just assign some moral values, like, because there is probably an underlying issue that you don't know about. You can look at and be like, oh, I can't do this because my ADHD, because of my OCD, my depression, or whatever. There is something going on. It's not just that you're a bad person.
Right. Well, yeah, I admire you for doing everything you did. How long have you been doing your podcast?
5 years now.
5 years. Think of the people that you've probably touched, just kind of like me, opening their eyes to something going on in their life. And, I'd say in a way you were a blessing to a lot of people. And really changed some lives just by the recognition. And you could sit back and not do your podcast and just not say a word to anybody. But having the willingness to get out and share your story in order to help other people, I commend you for that. And that's the whole purpose of what I try to do here, is bring people on like you who are dealing with stuff, and just to share your story so other people can have better and higher quality lives. Yeah.
I do think we should also just touch on the idea that, because I'm sure one thing that people often hear is they're like, what's the difference between like ADD and ADHD?
Right.
And it's a funny thing, because ADD was only a diagnostic thing for like 4 years in the 80s. Right. And it's just like entered into the mental psyche of what ADHD is. So what they changed the definition and made it so that there's 3 presentations of ADHD, which are inattentive, hyperactive, and then a combined type of the 2. And they're called presentations too because they can change as you get older.
Oh.
Although for diagnosis, you have to have displayed the symptoms before you were 12.
Okay. And it's kind of like a spectrum.
Yeah.
I've heard that referred to as numerous times with ADHD, because not every single person is the same. And I'm sure, just as I teach with autism, if you've met one person with it, you've met one person with it. It affects everybody in different ways and to varying degrees. So it's absolutely amazing to just open the eyes as far as the difference. Is there any, do you find with ADHD there's any stemming, as there is with autism, just a repetitive motion or behavior to help cope with things?
There is a lot of fidgeting. Like on my desk here, while we're talking, I have 8 toys to just play with right now. I have this rock in my hand that I'm just grabbing. And it is, well, it isn't like quite like a repetitive behavior like autism. It does serve like a very same purpose of creating a lot of stimulation within me. Right. It makes it much easier for me to focus on talking while I'm doing this with my hands.
So if an officer were to come up to you and you had that rock in your hand, some of them may say, oh, this is threatening. You need to drop the rock. Yeah. When in fact, that's going to cause that interaction with you to probably be a little more difficult. A rock can hurt you, but a small rock, something like that, if it's causing you to be able to calm down and have a more peaceful interaction, then the goal is a positive outcome. That's interesting to know, because I tell officers, just let them, if they're standing there flapping their hands or squeezing their hands, it doesn't mean they're always trying to fight you. They're probably coping with something that's stressing them. And in your case, that would be the same. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, I've talked to you for hours about this, and hopefully we can do this again. But we're running out of time. But just what you've shared today has opened my eyes, and I'm sure it's opened up anybody else who's going to view the podcast here. So I want to thank you so much for being willing to come on and share your story and share the information. And I'd encourage everybody, please check out Will's podcast. It's Hacking Your ADHD, because he's been doing it for 5 years. You can go back, and I'm sure you would learn a whole lot about him and possibly people you interact with, and not to mention yourself. So I want to thank you, Will, for being on today. I really do appreciate you being here.
Yeah. And thank you for doing this. I think this is a great thing that you're getting this information out there because, yeah, this is a lot of people don't know what they don't know. And this is a great way for them to find out that, oh, hey, things are a little bit different than what I thought.
Yeah, I didn't know until about a week ago when I started researching it. And I'd heard ADHD all along for years and years and years, but this, it would probably help me doing my job better. But I really do appreciate you being here, and I hope we get to see each other again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Everybody, I thank y'all for watching. This has been an eye-opener for me, and hopefully it will be for you. Just trying to give you a new perspective on different things that are out there in the disability community, things you may not have thought of. But I just want to thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. And Dad, I love you. Thanks for watching.